We want to drop our pictures to the bottom. All right, we'll get started. This is the second time I've done this presentation, and I cannot tell you how much I love doing this. It's as I go through this, you will probably hear me get more and more excited because every time I think through all the stuff that's happened in Bitcoin and all the stuff that will happen in Bitcoin, I can't help but get enthusiastic. I mean, I think that this is one of the biggest opportunities that we have seen since the internet, and I absolutely believe that. And I lived through the internet boom, and this is on par. So I'm really excited about this opportunity. So, sorry. So let me talk about Bitcoin in 2021 because we'll look forward, right? It's already a $700 billion asset. And just the only function right now is an alternative to gold, kind of a store of value, and that's brought its valuation up to 700 billion by itself. The phase two is that when it becomes a currency, and I think that will happen over the next 5 to 10 years. And then to quote Michael Novogratz, former Goldman Sachs guy, if you have a business, you really need to have a Bitcoin plan. There are so many opportunities that are and will be presenting themselves that if you don't, you're left out. So I was fortunate enough to attend the Bitcoin conference sponsored by MicroStrategy on February 3rd through 4th. And they had 6,000 corporations attend, like 7,000 or 8,000 people. 6,000 businesses attended to listen to Michael Saylor and a bunch of others talk about Bitcoin as a store of value for corporations. It was astounding, the level of enthusiasm over those 2 days. So basically, it's a new asset type that one should add to their portfolio in order to increase your diversification. There's a great website called Bitcoin Treasuries that's tracking the public companies or publicly announced companies and their investment in Bitcoin. Currently, $54 billion is invested by these companies in their treasuries on behalf of Bitcoin, or in the form of Bitcoin. And then one of the great internet memes these days is money printer go brrr, which is the image on the right there, and that's the Federal Reserve printing money literally as fast as they can, for good reason. I mean, to help the economy, to fight COVID, all great reasons. I'm not arguing that that's bad, but the M2 money supply has gone from 16 to 20 trillion dollars in 10 months. That's I think that is the largest increase in M2 as a dollar figure for sure, and I'm pretty sure as a percentage. And the concept there is that will ultimately bring about some devaluation of the US dollar, and therefore having part of your asset pool in a different asset type like Bitcoin will long-term be a good thing. MicroStrategy published a playbook, God bless them, which we have poured through and are using in our own consulting practice. It's extremely thorough, very well thought through, and if you email me, you can look online and find the playbook, or you can email me and I'll be happy to share a URL. The thing that doesn't get mentioned often enough from a Bitcoin for business strategy is it's not just a way to diversify your corporate treasury or a way to earn some money over time as the value goes up. It is a great way to accelerate your corporate digital transformation. All the little things you need to do to understand Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and to integrate them even in this relatively straightforward way as part of a treasury investment will elevate your digital transformation very, very quickly. And that alone makes it worth doing at least a small amount. So it was a great conference. I really had it was quite exciting. So what we're going to see in 2021 is a continued growth in this store value concept, where companies, businesses continue to invest a small amount of their corporate treasuries and high net worth individuals in Bitcoin as an alternative to gold and as a hedge for inflation. But what you also are going to see is what I consider phase two, is the use of Bitcoin as a currency. So far, that's been fairly modest, but everybody probably heard Elon Musk say you can now buy a Tesla motor car with Bitcoin. And that makes perfect sense because one Bitcoin's about $45,000. One low-end Tesla's also $45,000. So the light bulb it wasn't hard to switch that light bulb on and say, here's one Bitcoin, I'll have a Tesla, please. That's the use of Bitcoin as digital currency. But the Lightning Network, which is a layer 2 protocol built on top of Bitcoin, is going to dramatically accelerate the use of currency, Bitcoin as currency. And that you'll see more over the next couple of years. But that second use case is the reason why I think the value of Bitcoin will continue growing even past its use as a store of value. It's accelerating. The integration into our existing financial infrastructure is accelerating. I had a big list of all the things that are going along with this, but options, futures contracts, the OCC, the organization that helps banks, has approved all sorts of Bitcoin-related things for traditional banks. It's just every week you read some new piece about how Bitcoin is being integrated into our traditional financial infrastructure. All of those things are de-risking the investment, increasing accessibility, financial sophistication. We'll see multiple ETFs or exchange traded funds, and who knows what other kind of investment vehicles over the next few years. All of those things are going to de-risk investment. In fact, I think that the Tesla announcement from a corporate standpoint has just flipped it, so that the risk now is in not owning and accepting Bitcoin. So don't be risky. Invest in some Bitcoin for your business. You need to get out in front of this before you get a bottom-up request. Some corporate division of yours in the EU is going to say, hey, can we take Bitcoin, or can we pay this developer in crypto? You need to know what your answer is to that before you get asked. You don't want to get embarrassed. So if for no other reason, you want to get out in front before your divisions start asking. There's all sorts of different approaches, all sorts of different goals that any one business can have, but you need to figure out what makes sense for you. It's not one solution for all corporations. The Treasury Reserve stuff that we've seen from MicroStrategy and Tesla and others, that's just one thing. Remittances, payments, the PR value of saying your business is invested in Bitcoin, all are big deals. Plus the knowledge acquisition part, just going through the steps, even if it's only a small amount of Bitcoin, will really ramp up your corporate knowledge of the entire crypto space. So, as I mentioned, there were 6,000 corporations at this conference, and Tesla followed up with their $1.5 billion buy of Bitcoin. Currency, it's still small, but PayPal has adopted Bitcoin as a currency within their application, and they have 350 million users. Cash App, which is a division of Square, the credit card swipe people, and a very popular person-to-person payment app, they have 35 million users, and they're now supporting Bitcoin. The asset class has been adopted by Grayscale, which is a trust you can publicly hold. There's others that are, because Grayscale is $25 billion now invested in their Bitcoin trust. There's a lot of followers now, Stone Ridge, ARK, Osprey, Wilshire, and you get a new one announced every week. ETF soon, and then shock of shocks for me anyway, Mass Mutual, right? You know, everybody wears white shirts and ties, pinstripe suits, Mass Mutual. They just invested part of their asset pool in Bitcoin. That happened last week, and so, you know, the tide has turned. But again, to reinforce the point, there's no one answer on how to bring Bitcoin into your business. It really depends on your goals. So everybody needs a chart, right? So here's the chart. But this is not your normal chart. This is the Bitcoin PPI. The PPI was invented a bunch of years ago, and it's basically how many Big Macs can you buy with blank. So this is how many Big Macs can you buy with one Bitcoin. Now, it's not been updated since November, but as of last November, you could buy 6,000 Big Macs with one Bitcoin. Since November, the price has tripled. So now, with one Bitcoin, you could buy 18,000 Big Macs. And this isn't a silly slide, but important in one sense that once you get your head around Bitcoin and join a crypto exchange, you realize that what we're doing is trading one thing for another, right? You used to, this is old world, think of buying Bitcoin. That's the wrong way to think about it. What you're doing is trading your US dollars for Bitcoin. And that's a small but absolutely critical change in how your brain looks at things. And I think this slide, which I just added, is a good way to look at that. Because this slide go down, not number go up. This slide go down. And all we've done here is flip basically the previous slide and show the relationship between Bitcoin in the form of Satoshis, which is Bitcoin in a really small number. You can divide a Bitcoin into 100 million Satoshis. So as the Bitcoin value goes up, people for smaller transactions talk in Satoshis or sats. So it makes more sense than thinking about buying 18,000 Big Macs with your one Bitcoin. Two, being able to buy a Big Mac for 15,000 Satoshis, a small piece of a Bitcoin. So this is the big sats index. So this is as of January, and this is still gone down. Right now, one Big Mac is down to 11,000 Satoshis. So what we've done is flipped the XY, and you can see that maybe the Bitcoin isn't going up so much, but the US dollar is going down. And it's all a matter of perspective. So 10 steps to crypto governance. We have built a consulting practice for businesses around helping businesses get up to speed quickly. And these are some of the things we go through. Set your goals, set your security protocols for both, and then set your governance protocols. You really need 3 corporate documents, your reserve policy, your trading policy, and an accounting memo, how you're going to account for Bitcoin from a finance standpoint. You need to pick an exchange, fund your account, set up your wallet policies, set up both MFA, which is multi-factor authentication, which is like security above a password, and then multi-sig, which means for large amounts you need 2 signatures. That's literally what it means. Then you need to integrate it into your accounting processes and then promote it, at least internally, so all your divisions know you've now got this capability. And you might want to promote it externally because it can have some seriously positive consequences. Security protocols are absolutely key. We're dealing with money, and there's a insider phrase, not your keys, not your coins, which means if you don't keep control of your cryptographic keys, you can lose control of your Bitcoins. I won't go into too much detail here, but the image on the right is Byzantine monks from Mount Athos have extremely valuable religious relics. They keep them in a secured storeroom, and they have multiple keys. There's literally 4 keys, and each key is held by a different monk. That's multi-signature security, old school with iron. It's very cool. It's from 60 Minutes a few years ago. Finally, I want to mention Deloitte. I don't get any benefit from mentioning them, but they seem to me to be much further down the path from an accounting standpoint. They will do third-party audits of your security protocols. There's other things you can do, but I wanted to call them out in a positive way. So exchanges and brokers. One of the key decision points once you establish your goals is whether you want to hold crypto. You can just leave it in an exchange or leave it with a custodial service. I mentioned a few of them there. Or you could actually self-custody. If part of your goal as a corporation in your adoption of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies is to ramp up your learning curve, then you should absolutely do a little self-custody, because that's where the rubber meets the road, and you will learn a shitload more than if you just turn it over to somebody else. You'll still get the good PR, and you'll still get the asset protection if you turn it over to somebody else, but you won't learn nearly as much. So I actually do recommend a combination, or maybe a staged adoption where you do a little bit on your own and bigger investments with partners that have been there, done that. But that's the kind of thing we would talk about early on. The Fiat Exchange piece, this is where you trade your US dollars or euros for Bitcoin or other cryptocurrency. They're an essential component, and you can either use an exchange or an over-the-counter service, but you need some way to get dollars in and out for 99% of all businesses, which subjects you to KYC and AML, which, if you don't know, is Know Your Customer and anti-money laundering regulations. They can be simple or onerous depending on who you are and where you go. But for our experience, we established a crypto account at one of the exchanges for our business, and it took a couple weeks. They claim it can take a couple of days, but our experience is more like a couple of weeks. And they still break down. I mean, you hear about Coinbase more so than some of the others, but they do have their glitches. If you're going to do more than 100 grand, that's where the OTC or over-the-counter brokers come into play. And I'll point out that all the exchanges that I mentioned there on the right also have an OTC service, and there are also separate OTC providers. I did a pretty extensive review in October when we were establishing FlashStarts was establishing its own crypto account. And we looked at Coinbase, Kraken, and Binance, which are the 3 leading ones in the U.S. And for most businesses, I'd recommend Coinbase Prime because their customer service is better. If you're going to trade, though, there are some advantages to being on Kraken or Binance. But for customer service and for most of you, I'd recommend Coinbase. The OTC brokers, if you're going to do more than 100,000, all the brokers that I'm aware of have $100,000 minimum, 1 to 3 days to do it. They do it off hours. They do it with some algorithms that help the price not skyrocket if you go in to buy a lot. They all offer custody services, although traditional finance would tell me that you'd want your broker to be separate from your custody. Just heads up. But there are lists of brokers, and then all the exchanges that I mentioned also have brokerage services. Multi-factor, multi-sig. This is important, and I mentioned it here with its own slide because it's not something that usually comes up in normal course of business. But Google Authenticator is probably the recommended authentication service. And I also recommend that you do 2. So if you have 2 phones, when you get your little QR code and it says point your authenticator at this, don't just do it with one phone, do it with the backup phone. Ledger Vault, which is a hardware vault service. It looks like a USB, but this one, they have two, one for people and one for business. This is one designed for business. And they have a great white paper that really goes through the corporate governance for storing your own keys. Multi-sig is just a check with multiple lines on it requiring two signatures, that the digital version of that. For big sums, that's generally recommended best practice. Wallets, this is where not your coins really, but the keys that indicate you own the coins get stored. And they come in a bunch of different flavors. There's a differentiates whether it's live on the internet or not on the internet. Hot wallets are on the internet, cold wallets are not connected to the internet. And then there's hard and soft. The picture on the right is a hard wallet, which is actually a physical USB device that stores your crypto keys on that device, or it could be stored in software. It can be, and so that's it can be any one of those four different kinds. You could also custody your own keys, which is what the wallets are for, or you can have somebody custody them for you. Being your own bank, keep that in the back of your head, because as we play out what's happening in the crypto sphere and what's happening with Bitcoin, and you start learning about decentralized finance or DeFi, the opportunities to do some of the banking that you're currently outsourcing will come up, and the ability to do that as part of your business may provide you with significant strategic or tactical benefit. So stick that in the back of your mind. Key management, I've been to dozens of these presentations, and I can't think of one where they've actually shown a key. So this, stretching to the left-right limits of a slide, is a key that indicates that you own certain crypto. This one's made up. It's not real. Don't take it. But it's 256 bits, 64 characters, and that's what you're protecting with your wallets, is one of those keys. They're also, here we're going to the next slide for this one. Almost all modern wallets use what's called HD, which is not high definition, but hierarchical determinism, which means you can have one key from which you derive other wallet addresses. That's really important as you're setting up your governance. And I wasted a slide here just to show you that, because that's really critical to understand what you can do when you set up your policies. You can actually set up a wallet address for every single customer of yours, or you can set up a wallet address for every big transaction and an infinite number of other purposes. But just remember that you can have multiple addresses, and it's easy to spin them up. Hardware security modules, many of you in bigger corporations will already have one of these. Most, if not all of these, can also be used to manage your crypto keys. Square, the crypto business, published full deployment docs for one, I think it was Encipher, about how to actually use an HSM to manage your keys. So if you have one of those in your IT department, make sure you consider incorporating it. It's not required, but a lot of organizations have found it useful. Accounting integration. So I went to, I got an English degree out of college and then a law degree. I am not an accountant by any stretch of anyone's imagination, but I will tell you that Bitcoin is considered property, not currency. So you need to record the acquisition and sale date and apply capital gains taxes. That's the current rule in the U.S. The rules are different outside the U.S., which is one reason separate wallets can be useful for big acquisitions, and that because it's an easy way to track your cost basis. The Bitcoin ledger itself gives you the world's best audit trail. So knowing your key, you can always go back and provide your accountants with a very, 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 very good audit trail for all the transactions. There's a accounting practice aid there that defines that the they've defined Bitcoin as an indefinite-lived intangible asset, and that has some meaningful accounting treatment that we could discuss at some later date. But it does change the way you account for this compared to other asset types. So I'll note that MicroStrategy, when they announced their acquisition of a bunch of Bitcoin for their corporate treasury, got great PR. They had over 1 million Google page reads within a couple of days. Their stock has gone up significantly just because they bought some Bitcoin. Square, when they invested in Bitcoin, they got almost 1 million Google pages. So for those, Tesla, I haven't actually gone and looked to see what they got. But if you're in a particular industry and no one in your industry has put down a few bucks and bought some Bitcoin, you too can get a big bunch of Google page reads and good PR. You should certainly promote your newly acquired crypto capability internally, and then, depending on your goal, promote it to partners and externally. But be aware that that kind of external PR is going to make you a target of hackers. We got Bitcoin is a come steal my Bitcoin announcement, depending on who you are. So pay attention to that. So before you go announcing that you now take Bitcoin or you bought Bitcoin, make damn sure that you've got a very, very thorough security audit and that the Bitcoin is secured to the highest possible degree. That's a very strong point. So tomorrow, we have 3 things here that Bitcoin will become. Store of value, check. I think we're there. I think you're going to see Bitcoin grow just as a store of value because, frankly, it's a better gold. Bitcoin as a currency is going to happen this year, I think, in a big way. The Lightning Network, which is a layer on top of Bitcoin, allows you to send Bitcoin instantly and free. And that's a giant game changer. It opens up a wealth of new opportunities. It is unbelievably cool, and it's where I'm spending most of my time right now is on the Lightning Network. If you want to see why I think it's cool, take a look at a company called Strike.me. You don't have to use them, but understand what they're doing. And if you eventually do understand what they're doing, I guarantee you that your jaw will drop. And then the third one, which isn't discussed too often, but I think is the third leg of this stool that we're still a couple of ways away from, is Bitcoin is programmable money. Each one of these is going to drive the value of Bitcoin and the utility of Bitcoin up. We got one done, lots of room for growth, but I think it's been proven. 2 will start this year in a serious way, and 3 is still a little bit off. So in conclusion, Bitcoin has reached critical mass. I don't think there's any question about that. I predicted back in November that it would hit 44,000 in Q1, and I was lucky, and it did. So I think that's and what you're going to see going forward is a huge wall of money come in for institutional adoption as a inflationary hedge. And we, Flash Start, Shannon and I, have a very specific consulting service designed to advise your business on how to play in this new space. And it's very specific. We'll take up to 8 members of your company, take them through an 8-week boot camp. It's 1 hour a week for 8 weeks, and we will bring you and your business up to speed in 2 months, so that you can come up with a tactical and strategic goals for Bitcoin. So if you're interested in that, send me an email. We're just rolling that out today, and I think it would be a great way to take this to the next level. So we have a crypto website which we post stuff to periodically, and you can learn more. And there's also just showing off. If you want to send us some Bitcoin for no good reason whatsoever, the QR code on the right there is our Bitcoin account, and you could send me a Satoshi. So that is the slide presentation. And I'll go back into the chat room here. And Shannon, you want to come back online?
Yeah, I would say we actually have a few questions that have built in the queue.
Yeah, we got about 10. I finished pretty much on time, so we got about 10 or 15 more minutes to answer questions.
Yeah, there was we did have some discussion around Grayscale very early on, and whether it's a kind of a surrogate for Bitcoin. You chatted a little bit about Grayscale. We had a few folks who actually kind of pointed to the fact that they either own Grayscale or are considering it. And one particularly said that you can buy it pretty quickly. In fact, you buy it by the afternoon. However, the time to buy Bitcoin usually takes about 4 days. Do you have kind of a reaction to that, or what are your thoughts?
So it depends. It depends on what you're trying to do. If you just want to own some Bitcoin because you think it's going to go up and that's all, it's just an investment, Grayscale, and you're willing to pay a little premium, Grayscale is a great solution right now. I mean, that's why they've got $25 billion under management. But if you want to learn about Bitcoin, you're not going to learn shit from investing in Grayscale. So those are my two thoughts. I do have a third one, though. The accounting treatment is different. If you own Grayscale, it's a traditional investment. It's not considered an indefinite intangible asset. And that, again, not an accountant by any stretch, but that may matter to you depending on your financial stuff. So ask your accountant whether it matters if you own it as a classic asset or as an intangible asset, because that may make a difference depending on how much you're going to invest. But there's nothing wrong with Grayscale. I think it's 2% seems a lot for what they do, but they're the only game in town right now. I think if well, that's all. That's enough on Grayscale.
So another question, which is a little bit different, but how do you, kind of just the impact of sort of this Bitcoin and crypto sort of, occurrence that's happening in our financial sector, and really about what the carbon footprint of each Bitcoin transaction, because that's something we actually don't talk about in financial markets very often. So it is a new element that I think people are talking about. So we actually had folks who posted a little bit of information about that. So that actually I checked out the Twitter feed, but I wasn't able to click on it because I was listening to Charlie. But just Charlie, what's your take on the sort of carbon footprint and the kind of ethical considerations?
It's a really interesting area. I have two thoughts. The carbon footprint for Bitcoin is not all that different than the carbon footprint for mining silver or gold. And I've seen some calculations where they're somewhat on the same level. So that's one thought. The other thought, which is a little more sophisticated, is mining Bitcoin, which does use electricity, is a really unique way to extract value from hard to reach electrical energy sources. So you can, like, for example, you can only ship electricity 500 miles. But if I have a giant waterfall in the middle of nowhere, I can plop down a hydroelectric plant and plop down a bunch of Bitcoin miner computers and extract value from that water supply, convert it into Bitcoin, and my carbon footprint is relatively zero because it's hydro, and I've actually extracted significant value from that. And that, I think, is one thing we're going to see. Or, for example, if you live in a really sunny climate that's cold, you could put up solar panels, extract the value from that sun, convert it in not to electricity directly to send somewhere, but convert it into Bitcoin. That's a real business. So I'm sure what's going to happen is, as the price of Bitcoin goes up, those energy extraction propositions are going to increase. And the argument that Bitcoin is a bad thing because of its carbon footprint will, if not go away, will at least go down.
Perhaps it might drive some innovation at very minimum, right?
Yeah, well, it's a great. I mean, if we could get Biden to say, we want to be more energy efficient, and we're going to use it to generate Bitcoin, that's a double win.
That'd be very interesting for sure. We've had a question about how does one assess whether Bitcoin today is overvalued or undervalued? And I think that's a really interesting question, especially since we've seen it skyrocket in the last 3 months.
Yeah, I struggle with this one because it doesn't meet any of the traditional valuation metrics, right? I can't, like, I'm a startup guy, right? And you look at valuing ongoing businesses is how much cash they're going to generate. Right, what are their margins? How much cash? What's my return on investment? Bitcoin doesn't really work like that. It's much more like a currency, because if I hold $1 in my hand, that dollar doesn't generate anything. In fact, as the government prints even more and more of them, it is generating less. So even though the government declared it's not a currency, it is a currency. And I think you value it as in its role as a currency, which is it's not going to go down in value, I think, because you can't make more. And there's a finite amount of Bitcoin, and it has utility when you compare it to gold. It's lighter, you can ship it around, it's scarce. And just like fiat, like a US dollar or a euro, if we're using it, it has value. So that's my take on how you value it.
Got a few more come in. Outside of using Bitcoin, folks have been asking about diversifying to other kinds of assets like Ethereum or Ripple or Polkadot. What's your take on that, Charlie?
So for let me start this by saying I'm not qualified to give out financial advice for all sorts of reasons, okay? And I see personally value in Bitcoin as an investment. I see value in Ethereum as a programming platform. Beyond that, I don't personally see much value. I could be wrong, but in the history of things technologic, it seems to be a winner-take-all space, and I don't see any of the alternative coins providing significant value beyond Bitcoin. And I don't see any of the alt platforms providing significant value beyond Ethereum. So I'm a big fan of Ethereum as a programming platform and Bitcoin as an investment currency platform. I could be wrong.
And then we had someone who mentioned the Gates Foundation and the fact that they just launched a blockchain-powered mobile payment system. Charlie, have you dug into that at all?
No, I don't know anything about that. I know this. It sounds like that Strike.me service, which I am just blown away by. Right. That may be somewhat related, but I will certainly take a look at that. Thank you for Chris for bringing that up.
We have one more question come in, Charlie.
Here we got, we're out of time, but go ahead and throw another one in there.
It's about the next stage of Bitcoin and the volatility that perhaps stops it from being a functional currency to buy goods and services. So, like, where does it go from here?
Well, I think you'll see the beta, the volatility go down as it gets more and more adoption. I still, I did the one projection from in November. I think we're going to see Bitcoin double again this year, just based on its utility as a alternative to gold in corporate treasuries. Beyond that, it depends on how quickly the currency piece gets deployed. So.
But I'll say, like, is there something in like the sort of the Lightning Network? So here's the Bitcoin at like 44,991, and now we're using Satoshis for like buying coffee and other kinds of things. So like, when does that become so democratized that we would use that versus like a Venmo or some other kind of financial payment?
So that's
where my mind went.
Yeah, that's a great question. I use Venmo and Cash App and all of those, but what I can't do is send money from Venmo to Cash App, or I can't send money from Cash App to Venmo. Lightning completely changes that model.
That
it gives you,
layer.
yeah. It's right. Like, back in the Middle Ages, every single feudal fiefdom had their own currency. And, you'd take your little bag of Frankfurt coins and you'd travel to the next fiefdom and try to spend them. They go, I don't know what those are. I can't take them. And that's where we are now with digital currencies. That's also why I think Libra will fail, or whatever Facebook is calling their digital currency. And going way back, I remember in the early 90s, people were talking about which proprietary network, AOL or CompuServe, would win. And I kept going, they're both going to lose because they won't talk to each other. And at some point way back then, it wasn't obvious that the internet, because it was open, was necessarily going to win. Same thing with Lightning. Lightning is an absolutely open source protocol upon which anybody can build, and things like Cash App and Venmo and whatever the Gates Foundation is doing, if you build a proprietary one, you will lose. So you need to build. The winners are going to be built on. The winners are going to be built on Lightning and Bitcoin. I'm really sure of that.
All right.
Okay.
I think that's all for our questions. Let's check out our poll. So, do you own Bitcoin? We have 42% who said yes, and 50% who said not yet, and around 7 to 8 said it's not for me.
Interesting. Okay. The yes number is higher than I would have thought, which is great.
Yeah, for sure. I think we might have a few Grayscale folks in that as well.
Yeah, well, that counts. That counts as owning Bitcoin. It's a little indirect, but it still counts. I don't think anybody used a tip dart. Nobody sent me any. Nobody sent us any. No
Satoshis today.
No, that's okay. You're forgiven. We told you it was free. But if you are interested in the consulting services, please let us know. My level of enthusiasm will stay high for a long time, and I guarantee you'll get a lot of value out of that. Your business will. All right. Any more final chat questions? People seem to be lingering.
Yeah, that's cool.
I could say something controversial. No, I won't say something controversial. All right. Okay. Thank you all for attending. I had more fun than you did, probably. And we may do this again if the world continues. If the currency theme plays out as I anticipate it will, we will absolutely do this again. Okay. All Shannon, right. See you on the other side.
See you. Thanks. Have a great day, everyone.